Hi, everybody. Gosh, it feels like it's been a year since I've seen a lot of you. It's great to be here, and I'm thrilled, and thanks for that, and thanks for the remarks there, too, and I'm challenged by that. This is a great time to start the conversation this weekend about sustainability. I'm fortunate to be able to be the one to lead off, and the other panelists will have things to say too, and I think you'll have an interesting set of things to hear, and then we'll see in the discussion afterwards how we all balance each other out. But in order to get us going, I just want to set the record straight. I usually like to wear ties for these things, and you know, my first lesson in sustainability is a sustainable practice in marriage is realizing when you forgot your tie, don't call your wife and ask her to FedEx one to you. And so that's just one of those things that I know better than to do. But I think there's proof, by the way. She actually took that picture and sent it to me. So I do actually own a tie. So you don't have to worry about that. But there's a little moral to that point there, that a lot of the things that we learn about sustainability come from our own mistakes. And so my credibility is not the things that are on the bio, it's all of the things that I dare never put on the bio, all of the things that we did. And I'm just going to assume you're all saints, and I'm the one that never figured out how to get it right. So I'll talk a little bit from that experience. I also want to just start with our conference theme scripture, and you see that on the front page of your program, and it says this: "This is what the Lord Almighty said: administer true justice, show mercy and compassion to one another, and do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner or the poor." And the question that I've got for you is, to whom does this apply? Does it apply to that population that heard it thousands of years ago? Does that apply to our current generation? Or the challenge and the opportunity is, does it apply to the generations yet to come, to our future? And that's the opportunity that I think we have thinking about sustainability, is to lay the foundations for things that will honor these words for a lot of time to come. And imagine that for the next 10 minutes that I speak, instead of hearing me talk about sustainability, imagine that you all just turn and talk to each other. Don't do it, because after all, I'm up here. But imagine that you do that, and these are the kind of things that I think you would probably say to each other. Sustainability. Well, faith-based organizations are more sustainable because they outlast many governments and are donor-driven programs. They last longer. Churches have been around for a lot longer than a lot of places. Okay? Or I plan for sustainability in my grants by promising to find local money after the grant's over. Okay? We all put that into our grant applications, don't we? Or the third, God gives us the inspiration and the resources. God sustains us. And those are not bad things. Those are inspiring things to be able to say. But I wonder, all of that may be true, but is that all that there is at the core of sustainability? And so I'd like to define sustainability. Okay? I'd like to put it this way. Sustainable development. Here's the definition that I learned a long time ago: meeting the needs of people today without compromising the ability of people to meet their own needs in the future. Do something today that won't compromise your ability to meet your needs in the future. And I think there are a lot of definitions out there in health right now. These are a few things that you find on the web if you Google sustainability in health: delivering high quality care and improved public health, improving lives for generations to come, and that sense of personal commitment to health. And I would add to that, sustainability also includes partnering locally and supporting initiatives that by definition outlast partner involvement. Get the point there. We partner locally and support initiatives that by definition will outlast that very partnership. That's when we start talking about real sustainability. It's not dependent on the partnership even. So yeah, good things. I'm glad you started off with the UN Development, the Sustainable Development Goals. And just for the record, if you're not tracking all of these, there's a lot there. 17 goals, 169 targets, and over 300 indicators that make up the Sustainable Development Goals. And they're intended to draw focus and coalesce our action. But sometimes people criticize these things. They criticize them, and you can read it in the literature. There's not enough specific information about health, or They don't affirm values that are important to us, or they don't specifically call out a role for faith-based organizations. And that's unfortunate because there's a lot of richness in the Sustainable Development Goals. The third one that got everybody to stand up, Pauline, number 3, good health and well-being, covers things that on this list are things that probably, if you poll everybody in the room, we're all doing at least one of these things in the programs and projects that we're involved in. So right there is something that probably captures almost every one of us. But what you might not know is that in addition to that, there are at least 5 other health-related sustainable development goals. A goal on zero hunger, clean water and sanitation, sustainable cities and communities that deal with our problem with slums, peace, justice, and strong institutions, which, by the way, interestingly, that's where language comes in about child exploitation and trafficking. So, I was wondering where that was. It's under peace and justice. And then strong institutions also deal with accountability, of course. And then partnerships. And you look around the room, and that's what we're here for, is to talk about how can we partner? How can we learn from each other and strengthen each other's initiatives? So we are the living embodiment of many of these things in many ways. And so these are powerful motivations, and we should be familiar with them. But will that make our work together sustainable? I just want to challenge us a little bit with a few thoughts here. What makes us think that something is sustainable? Okay? Well, we believe it in our hearts that this is good work that we do. We can measure it. We can see the effects of it. Or we have faith because God called us to this work. And that's powerful. Those are strong motivations for the work that we do. But here's the challenge now. Sometimes our work really looks like this, and this is where the embarrassing stories come in. And I look back at my life and the things that I did when I first became involved in development work, and I think, wow, go it alone strategies. Hey, we're smart. We can go solve that complex problem. After all, we put somebody on the moon, so we can go solve the complex problems in Kenya, can't we? Wait, who said that we had the right to even think like that? One-off strategies, okay? Hey, let's make life better for somebody right now. We can make somebody happier right now, but that's not a sustainable strategy by definition. Externally imposed strategies. Well, this works in your church or your community or your workplace, so it should work someplace else, right? These are the fallacies that come into our thinking. Experimental approaches. Well, I've never seen anybody do this before. Maybe we should give it a try. I don't know if it'll work. Hey, what can go wrong? Let's give it a try. Technologies that work in the US. I had lunch with somebody today who talked about steam-operated bedpan cleaners in a hospital that she worked at in Tanzania that got 13 of these things on a container. And they needed a centralized steam supply to run this set of steam cleaners for the bedpans in this hospital. By definition, not a sustainable technology. And then gap filling. And this is the sensitive one because we're all, because of our hearts, because of our commitment, we're trying to do things that will make a difference. Okay, we stand in the gap. That's what many of us do. And the challenge is, will that actually lead to positive growth and development? If those adages, I really, the old tired thing about give a person a fish and you fed them for a day, all of that, teach a person to fish, you fed them for a lifetime. There's a little bit of truth in that, folks, and that's where sustainability has to be part of our thinking. How can we build over time? And I'm just going to put these up here. 5 threats to sustainability in each of our programs. These are the challenges also that we have. Okay, disaster. We can't prevent them, but they do undermine our sustainability. Distraction. In Uganda, one of the things that we saw was with all of the money and attention that went into HIV, the people that did wash work were complaining that they weren't getting the resources or attention to keep communities clean and safe and healthy. Diversion of resources. Okay, the loss and theft of resources. Dereliction, not showing up, not doing everything that we could do. And finally, dependence on aid are things that threaten sustainability. I'm going to go through this, just right down to a couple of core points here. What value do we add as Christians? And this is really the thing that I want to leave with you as we start into this weekend together. What do we add as Christians? Oh, let me go back. Look, I skipped one. There. We add these things, these kind of values, these core tenets, I think, are things that we all would aspire to in our work. Upholding dignity for the lives of people we support, or working on improving ethics and conduct in our villages or in our health care. These are things that Christians should be known for. Compassion in care, holistic focus, having a clear focus on the fullness of health and wholeness. Transformation. As a people, we live and we work in the business of transformation. So it's an opportunity to do that. That's something that we add as Christians to that. And then finally, stewardship of resources and the wise application of resources. We have interesting discussions at medical teams, and I'm looking at Janice, our Director for Program Quality, and we have great discussions about the role of community-based work and health system strengthening, and where do you put your emphasis on communities and health systems? Well, it turns out you get more impact for the dollar to work in, we get more impact per dollar when you work on the community-based side. You impact more families, more households, more people, and have more impact when you work on that side. Preventing illnesses, preventing problems, and helping and equipping communities to care for people that are sick. However, when they're sick or when they need medical care, then they need to go to the hospital or they need to go to the health center. And will they be equipped there with people that are professionally trained, and will they have the supplies that they need in order to receive good quality care? It's not an either or, this is a both and. And so we have to think together about how we can be sustainable and apply good stewardship. All of this goes together then with what we receive, because as Christians we rely on divine guidance. And that is my final point, that I think what we really have is a narrative. This is, the word narrative came out of a book written by a guy named Phil Eaton about higher education and what differentiates Christian higher education from all other higher education. And he said, this is story, it's the narrative, the fundamental storyline, the epic plot that makes sense out of our journey together. Our story is a beginning and an end, and in the middle of this story is the battle of good and evil and the occasional loss but the eventual triumph of life. And that through Christ we offer hope and grace for a world that is hurting. Through Christ we offer hope and grace for a world that is hurting. Through Christ we offer hope and grace for a world that is hurting. And to me, I think that's sustainable health. Okay? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Doug, and pray that your message will carry through this conference and when we go back home. Our next speaker is Karen Sichinga, who is the Executive Director of Churches Health Association of Zambia, and she's quite a woman. She doesn't only direct the Christian Association of Zambia, she's actually the chairperson of all African Christian health associations in Africa. So we're really glad to have her. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. It also means that I was sustained because we couldn't land last night in Washington. So the pilot told us, no, there's a tornado, and I'm very familiar in my earlier life in Canada of tornadoes. They're twisting winds, and they can lift a car, and they can lift persons. And so I knew what the pilot was talking about, so we were diverted to go somewhere else. And so we're sustained in an aircraft for 3 hours. We were not getting out because they couldn't park. We couldn't park. And so when we were eventually told to leave the aircraft, we were again sustained for 4 hours before we were told where to go. So I only came this afternoon. But I'm very happy to be here, and I thank the organizers for inviting me to come and share my thoughts. My presentation is not academic, it's actually just thoughts. Thoughts as we were implementing the Millennium Development Goals and sharing with staff and saying, what do you think of sustainable development goals? We know for sure that Christian health networks provide up to 60% of national health care in sub-Saharan Africa. And by the way, I chose not to use PowerPoint because I was afraid that I would not sustain my neck because I would keep doing this and this. So I decided to just put my thoughts down. The question we need to ask ourselves, therefore, is what development efforts, what can development efforts really sustain? Is there anything that is truly sustainable? The book of Isaiah, chapter 51, verse 6, reminds us, and I quote, "Lift up your eyes to the sky, then look to the earth beneath, for the sky will vanish like smoke, and the earth will wear out like a garment, and its inhabitants will die like manna. But my salvation will be forever, and my righteousness will win." We also see a similar message in Matthew 24, verse 35 to 36. Heaven and earth is very familiar. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. No one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Ladies and gentlemen, until this time comes that Jesus is referring to in Matthew, we have work to do. God has called us to save his people. The Sustainable Development Goals employ an international desire to improve the lives of God's people. For Christians in health, this is a call to sustain development gains scored in the Millennium Development Goals 4, 5, and 6 in the last 15 years. Faith shapes lives, influencing their behavior for a sustained change individually and collectively. Christian religion is present even in remotest parts of our countries, making a major partner in development at all levels, particularly at community level, where change needs to take place. Christianity, therefore, in our region, used three vehicles to influence development. It used education, health, and evangelism. Church-related education and health systems have worked closely with governments to improve the health status of the people for over 100 years. Christian health services can be relied upon because they have shown invaluable commitment, saving the vulnerable in the society for decades. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals are rather broad and complex. They require time and effort to understand and digest. The theme chosen by Christian Connection for International Health is commendable and a step in the right direction. The SDGs are interrelated, however, and if successfully implemented, could transform the world into a better place for all. But as for global health partners, we are primarily concerned with SDG number 3, the health-related goal, which says we are to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages. I have no doubt in my mind that as Christian health networks, we participated in the implementation of the Millennium Development Goals 4, 5, and 6 in our countries. The MDGs have been combined now into goal number 3 in the Sustainable Development Goals. For this reason, it has been said that the SDG number 3 is a continuation of MDG 4, 5, and 6. Clearly, we had unfinished business in the MDGs. The UN experts expects countries to use the experience gained in the MDGs era to successfully implement the SDGs. Unfinished business, ladies and gentlemen, means that the battle against poverty, which she talked about, and disease has not yet been won. So we have work to do. We have to continue with what we started in the MDGs. I have some of these questions now. How can we do it better in the SDGs era to make a difference, particularly for the least of our brothers and sisters in the society? What shall we do differently to end poverty, prevent disease, and improve the health status of our people? And how can Christians' Health Network remain relevant and strengthen their role in the 2030 development agenda? How shall we do it? In my view, it is very simple. And I warned you that this wasn't an academic paper. It was feelings and thoughts. In my view, we need to embrace partnership without losing our identity as a Christian organization and maintain our comparative advantage. In my view, we need to demonstrate our capability to manage large-scale programs which address diseases of public health concern. In my view, we need to continue to be innovative. Because you see, as Christian Health, if we are innovative, we can do things faster. We can test strategies faster, and we've done it before. And then we can go to government and simply say, this works. And we have done it before in Zambia with home-based care, where it became one of the strategies in the Ministry of Health. Because as Faith, we were able to demonstrate that it is a workable strategy. When HIV and AIDS had so many patients, claimed so many lives, and hospitals couldn't contain with people who were seeking hospital care. And it was a mission hospital that started it all. So as faith or Christian healthcare, we can innovate and demonstrate and show government that this can work. We can ensure that we are transparent and accountable for every resources that we receive. We can invest in human resource for health and sustain them. Quite often, we think that because we are Christians at a hospital or in organization, we can just employ anybody without skills, so long as they are church leaders. That era is gone. We have to make sure we invest in human resource and employ the best. We have to document and document and document and document about our success stories. And that's an area where we don't do very well. We do not document. Granted that we are so busy and we just want to have things done and over with. But we have to show our developmental partners that we can do things better and efficiently. And we can't just show by mouth. We can't show by speaking. We have to document. And I must admit that even in CHAZ, we haven't done very well. We've done so much, but we have not documented, not even a quarter of what we have done. And I take the blame. What development do we want to sustain? In my view, again, we need to sustain the lessons learned or knowledge in the Millennium Development era. Skills we acquired and the gifts that God has invested in each one of us. We need to sustain Christian values and maintain our identity. as faith-inspired organization without making any apologies. Ladies and gentlemen, quite often we make apologies. No, we are a Christian organization. And sometimes development partners have this stereotype about us. We are not learned because we keep making apologies. Christ didn't. Christ didn't make apologies of who he was. We ought to be confident and defend our faith. Because this is what sets us apart from other people. This is what exactly sets us apart. This is our number one identity. We are Christians first, second, development partners. And so we need to be proud and walk with our heads high and call ourselves Christians. And yes, tell the world we can do it better with a prayer. After all, that's what we do best. That's the end. And as Christian health networks, we have worked to sustain expertise developed in the last 100 years. These include not least limited to advocacy, health service delivery, human resource development, training, supply chain, grant making, procurement. The list goes on. We have to sustain strong partnership with our governments and our developmental partners is key in the new era of SDGs. Government relationships, I know, are hard work, but I know also that they are doable. The just ended World Health Assembly called for multi-sectoral approach in the implementation of sustainable development goals. It also means that government will not do it alone. They need us. Christian health associations are sustained government partners in the delivery of health service delivery. So in order for us to meaningfully contribute, we have to make sure that we work with our governments and sustain those relationships. We have tools for sustainability. Faith in our God, a belief that with God all things are possible while doing our part, using our skills and gifts, and investing in people, strategic partnership which have mutual respect and shared vision. I want to share one key lesson that we have learned. One key before I sit down. We have learned that not all developmental agenda agrees with our faith values. Sometimes funding comes with conditions contrary to our Christian values. In conclusion, we need to sustain ourselves and that which we have learned and our faith in God. With these few words,
Thank you.
I'm done.
I'm going to have a little bit different perspective. I'm going to have more of a theological perspective because that's what I've been studying for the past 10 years. I think, the question about whether or not the Bible speaks about this topic of sustainable development is that it is there. And in fact, my premise is that many of these goals that have been developed by the United Nations have been informed by a Christian worldview, even though they have not been acknowledged as such. And that's one of my conclusions in looking at these things. The global goals are more comprehensive than the Millennium Development Goals. I think we can embrace them in the sense that they look at a broader impact. In fact, all of the Sustainable Development Goals have some impact on human health and well-being. But it also shows that the world is more than just human beings, and that we're part of a larger biosphere and part of a larger system. These are more challenging to accomplish, however. There's more of these than the Millennium Development Goals. There's a great deal of challenges. It almost seems impossible, doesn't it? But they are, I would premise that they are informed by a Christian ethic, and we'll look at some of the parallels with the Christian worldview and these goals, and some of the ways that we can come alongside these, support them, and actually defend them in public. Their shared goals, I think, point to a transcendent moral law. And that's one of the apologetics for the Christian worldview as well. So if there's a transcendent moral law, if we can all agree on some higher principles, then perhaps there is a greater principle beyond all these things. And in fact, the Bible speaks to those things. The terminology that's used is often borrowed from the Bible. I would say transforming, or paligenesis in the Bible in Greek, is transformation, is used in the product from the Sustainable Development Goals, transforming our world. It's inclusive. It means not leaving anybody behind. It also, as we're maybe going to focus more on number 3 this weekend, I think there's more to look at in all of the Sustainable Development Goals in terms of how Christians can interact with them. And we can see that there is a beauty in interdependence and a recognition of interdependence between different agencies and multilateral groups toward fulfilling these goals. And the Christians, as we may have mentioned already, are in a unique position. Faithful presence is one thing that is something that I think the secular humanist power brokers are recognizing, that there is a faithful presence throughout the world, particularly in areas that are underserved, and that the church itself is an expanding influence. And this has been well documented, that the church is growing throughout the world in areas where it never existed, and in areas that have been the product of missionary outreach. And the church is both a gathered and a scattered community. Gathered in the sense of fellowship, like this weekend, we gather together, but then we scatter through all the ends of the earth to be able to serve and to be able to promote health in all of our areas. We also know that the church is a major resource that can be mobilized, and going into communities to be able to mobilize resources in order to serve the needs of those communities, even without funding. Because resources are more than just funds from governments. Resources are much broader than that, and it also is very clear from the scriptures. We also participate in global universal goals. We, as Christians, have universal goals. We do care about all. We want the inclusiveness of these goals, of all peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations, as well as particularly the poor. But I would say that you can create a structure and you can all agree on goals and ends, but if you don't have fuel in the machine is not going to go anywhere. And my premise is that the fuel of faith and the fuel of devotion to the teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ is fuel for the machine. And that there's a prayer that says, "Make me thy fuel, O flame of God." The fuel for the machine comes from those things that the church brings to communities. It's also wind in the sails. A sailboat doesn't, I used to be in the Navy. The sailboat doesn't go anywhere without wind in the sails. So we can create all kinds of goals, but unless there's wind, unless there's fuel, we're not going to be going anywhere. But discernment is required. So while we might agree with many of the Sustainable Development Goals, we can also, and we can perhaps ascribe some of the goal origins to divine revelation, and which can be an apologetic, as I mentioned. We have to avoid the Tower of Babel approach. We have to remember that the Tower of Babel was throwing off the yoke of God's leadership and trying to reach into the heavens and solve our own problems without God, or making God, in a sense, irrelevant. So we also have to acknowledge the Babylon reality, is that we still live in Babylon, and that to create a utopia where everyone gets along and that there's complete peace and health and harmony may not be something that will be fully attained in this epoch of history. We also have to understand that secular utopianism is quite different than eschatological hope. We also know that economic development is different than transformation. Transformation is a deep change from the very heart, whereas economic development tends to be the focus of the Sustainable Development Goals. Pantheism has to be contrasted with theistic creation mandate. So while we're called to steward the earth's resources and to be able to participate in care for creation, we don't worship the creation. And whether or not the full inclusivity that is spoken of in the Sustainable Development Goals is fully inclusive is something that we have to critique. Are we including all tribes, tongues, and nations? Are we including every level of human development from the time of conception on? And there's missing pieces too. If you read the Sustainable Development Goals, there's nothing about compassion, love, sacrifice, generosity. This is the fuel which keeps the machine going. It's the wind in the sails. And that these goals can be shadows of the reality, but we know that the reality is found in Christ. That's what we believe. So what is sustainability? So somebody mentioned that maybe the Bible doesn't say much about sustainability, but it does actually, as a matter of fact. It's built into the fabric of creation, that God created the world to be sustainable in and of itself. There are 2 verses in the Old Testament that speak of human sustainability toward other human beings. And I mentioned them here: Isaac to his father Jacob, and Obed, the son of Ruth, to his mother. These are 2 examples of human beings that take the responsibility of caring for others. Now, this is multi-generational, and if we don't think about the next generation, and if we don't care about those who are the youngest and the most vulnerable among us, then we're missing out on the biblical view of sustainability from human to human. But if you contrast that with 16 verses in the Old Testament that speak of sustainability as God's ongoing work, it's quite remarkable, and we'll look at some of those. And in the New Testament, we have Hebrews 1:3, where Jesus sustains all things by his word, bearing fruit. The same word that is used sustaining is used about the men who were carrying the paralytic to Jesus to be healed, and also bearing fruit. So if you look at sustainability in the Old Testament, when no one was available to intervene, by his own hand he worked salvation for him. Israel was found in the wilderness to be sustained by God. God influences us and sustains us for life and for the day-night cycles through illness, requiring a willing spirit on our part as we participate with God's sustaining power and healing. He asks us to cast his cares upon us, and Sustainable Development Goals does mention more mental health issues. The hand and arm of God is spoken of as the care and healing. The laws sustain him, which is about the justice of God, that we live not just to live, but to praise, that we live in hope, and that we do care for the foreigner, the widow, and the orphan, and even unto the old ages, all generations and all peoples. And the humble, not the wicked. A well-instructed tongue are words that sustain the weary. So as we participate in God's act of sustaining, we move toward using the words that he speaks to us. We speak of dominion, stewardship of the gift, the motif of darkness to light, about not just having our bellies fed as one of the goals, but having a hunger and thirst for righteousness, to feel the need for God, to be in this state of the already, that we are participating in seeing God's kingdom on earth, and that the not yet, that we have an enduring hope for the things and the liberation that comes from us. A few cautions I would ask, these are some questions that we need to ask as we critique the Sustainable Development Goals. Is it possible or even preferable to eradicate poverty completely? Is it redistribution, or is it an opportunity to give? He who had too much did not have too much. He who had too little did not have too little. Economic prosperity, is it the ultimate end? Is universal health care versus universal access to the gospel something? You know, we say there are churches, but there are not churches everywhere. There's not churches in every people group, and that's part of the work of the church as well. We're informing the facts. Are we telling people about facts and data? Are we teaching them everything that Jesus commanded us? Are we promoting equality, or just inverting the power struggles that exist between humans, between the genders, between the races? And what is great gain, according to Paul? Godliness with contentment is great gain. So the fuel and wind, as Jaikumar Christian says, only worldview level, encompassing beliefs, values, ethics, and principles, is the thing that leads to lasting change. And this is also reflected in UNESCO about those things that the church brings to bear in communities and nations. And Reverend Tviet, who's the head of the World Council of Churches, just had a conference in Germany in February, where he said, development usually engages in policies and practices without engaging the fundamental levels of belief, values, and ideas. And this is, I think, what the church brings to communities. Okay. And this is our preferable future. We're a city on a hill. The wealth of the nations are brought into it, living water, creation care, and the tree of life, healing of the nations, new heavens and new earth, an inclusive society. And that's what we're looking at. And the key to, just one other point. This last verse from Zechariah, the next verse from our signature verse for this conference about administering justice, showing mercy, it says, but they refused to pay attention. Stubbornly, they turned their backs and covered their ears. They made their hearts hard as flint and would not listen to the law or the words that the Lord Almighty had sent by his Spirit through the earlier prophets. And this is a prophecy to the church, to the people of Israel at that time who were scattered, who didn't follow this ethic and this rule. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.
Oh, sorry. Oh, perfect. I didn't even know we had it here. But thank you so much to our speakers for that rich conversation or speeches that they've given us. And I gained a lot from listening to them. And I know that some of the questions you just raised, Daniel, are questions that will take a lifetime or even longer than a lifetime to respond to. But I do want to give you the opportunity to ask our panelists questions. And please, when you do ask questions, don't give us a commentary, because I know all of us, are very rich in, experiences, and so we're able to share all of that. And so I'm going to open it up, but before I do, we're going to be taking 3 questions, and then our panelists will respond. And I want you to think about this also, that these sustainable goals, as it has been said, are interconnected. And, I also want you to think about that if you don't lay the foundation for addressing these sustainable goals, you will be treating the symptoms. And for most of us, that's what we're doing. We're treating the symptoms. We're too afraid about dealing with issues of justice, but we do want to, for example, we are afraid of dealing with gender injustice, but we want women to have safe motherhood or to have safe pregnancy, but we're too afraid to address what makes them vulnerable. We're too afraid of asking why people are poor, because that will challenge the capitalistic system that we live in. But we are working on ending poverty. So we keep on addressing the symptoms instead of going to the root causes of the problem. So the floor is open. Please ask questions. We're going to take 3. Yes, Mona.
You need to use the microphone, please, when asking your question, so please raise your hand.
That's good, because I don't have to repeat the questions. Are you still with us, or do you want to go to bed? Good. Let's start from here. Thank you. Where are the microphones, Mona? Oh, okay. Please run. I can see you're young, so you got to rush it. Oh, there first, please. And then we'll come this way. Sorry.
My question is in response to something that Dr. O'Neill said related to redistribution. And I just wanted to question and challenge and see what you thought. It seems to me that there are people with too much and people with too little. And in fact, in the book of Leviticus, God made provisions for that in his own people, that the year of Jubilee would help to correct that problem of redistribution. Mm-hmm. I'd like your thoughts on that and see what do you think about Christian engagement in trying to bring about social change to lead to redistribution?
Thanks. Just an easy question. Next question over here, please.
I'd like to bring my question by bringing up another verse that none of you did quote that I think also has to do with sustainability, and that's where our Lord said that no one who puts their hand to the plow but looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. And where I'm going with that is I wonder if you want to unpack a little about when the question of sustainability is we start something and others can carry it on, and when it's really a question of us sustaining our ongoing partnership with people so that we're in it for the long haul.
Thank you. Next question from this side, please. Anybody? Okay. Who else? Yes, please, in the back.
Yeah, thank you to all three panels. It was great. I was going to ask a question about inclusivity. Dan mentioned that a few times about inclusive societies. I guess sometimes the church is accused of being not inclusive and being exclusive. Even in disability, for example, we have a very low representative of people with disabilities in our churches, and other things like HIV, and some things are done very well. But just to ask, what was the biblical basis, and how can we more strongly use that biblical basis to promote inclusion in our society, in our churches and society?
Okay. So who wants to go first? Daniel? This is a question.
Sure. I'll try to mention, maybe try to tackle the redistribution idea. I mean, if you look at the book of Acts, the covenant community was laying the money at the apostles' feet and distributed according to need. So there was a redistribution that was based upon the unction of generosity within the covenant community and the stewardship of the apostles, who then took it upon themselves to distribute according to need. So there was both the responsibility of the apostles and the generosity that welled up among the people. It wasn't coercive, it wasn't demanding, it wasn't robbing from Peter to pay Paul, as we always say. But I think you're absolutely right, and you can see in this, it's an interesting contrast between the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals, where Sustainable Development Goals have focused more on the problems of excess, the problems of obesity, the problems of the non-communicable diseases, which are increasing in developing countries, and the excesses of drug and alcohol addiction, et cetera. So there is a problem with just thinking of as economic equity solves all the problems. It doesn't. And the poor among us teach us how to trust in God. The poor among us give us opportunity to practice generosity. And the poor, being generous, are also a testimony to God working through them. I'll have to leave the other one to Dan's question, because I didn't quite understand that. But in terms of the inclusivity that Nathan mentioned, I think it gets down to the human dignity and worth, which I think the Bible and the Christian worldview elevates to a high degree. So regardless of functionality, regardless of age, regardless of developmental status or dependency, for example, my contention is the fetus is dependent, but also worthy of the dignity that the Sustainable Development Goals don't necessarily support. And also those who don't have the capacity to serve or give in some kind of material capacity are still worthy because they're human beings, made in the image and likeness of God. And I think that would speak to the church's inclusivity for disability, for example, and the most vulnerable among us.
Thank you.
I'll just say something about the partnerships. It's always a struggle, and I made a pretty strong statement there about having a focus on partnerships that outlast, the work that outlasts the partnership. And I think we should be humble about the fact that we have time limits on our work and on our professional lives, and one of the challenges of people that work in our space is we often view our work as indispensable. And how can people continue if we're not there? And I'm here to tell you, if you don't really have this, it's the most transforming thing to relax a little bit and say, God's actually got this, and He's actually smarter and more eternal than me. And so that's one of those things that it's very freeing. And so I also apply that then when I work or when I think about partnerships. I think about these things that are going to last way beyond me. I had the privilege of working in Uganda at a university that was established in 1913. And I came along in 2004, worked there for 8.5 years at its point in its trajectory, and it will continue for many, many years after, all the way up until the return of our Lord. And it's fantastic. It's exciting. So I don't have to worry about where it will go. I just know that during that season, I had something that I was called to do. And I think if we can embrace that in our own work and lives. So Dan, I don't know if that's speaking to your question, but that's what I'm thinking. It's a little tight here.
I was going to say partnership, it depends on the basis on which that partnership was established. And I think where we've gone wrong is that we've based our partnership basically on money. So when money is done, then it's finished, then a partnership goes. But it doesn't have to be based on money. It can be based on other things. And I've seen partnerships that have gone for over 20 years, and it's not necessarily money. Money has gone, but other things have continued. And in terms of inclusiveness, sometimes I think as Christians, we tend to act holier than thou. And so we tend to push people who we are supposed to invite so that they are saved. But we tend sometimes to be judgmental. And it's two ways too. And even other people who feel that they are being excluded, sometimes it's just self-stigmatization and nothing else.